Hey, welcome to Mike's Motorworks, and on this episode, we're going to give you the ultimate guide into changing your own oil. Check it out. So one of the first things that you'll be presented with is how exactly do you select the right oil for your application. Now understand what's right for my truck may not be right for your small economic vehicle. What's right for here in the state of Florida may not be right for up in Canada or Maine where it's a little bit colder. Then on top of that, if you're a high performance vehicle, if you're a modern vehicle, if you're an old muscle car, what exactly fits your vehicle compared to maybe an economic vehicle or a four-cylinder? Well, the easiest way to find that information out is to check your manual, right? And that information will be right there. Now, if you by chance don't have your manual, there's a couple other places you could check. Open your hood up and then check the oil cap, right? A majority of the vehicles have the oil recommendation there on the oil fill cap. And we'll show you where that is on two different vehicles here shortly, right? And then if you can't see it there and you don't know exactly how much it takes, you could actually check online. You can go to various websites. You can give your local CarQuest a call. They can look that information up for you to see how many quarts of oil it takes, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of good information out there, but beware, there's also a lot of bad information as well. So when it comes time to buying your oil, there's a couple ways to buy it. Obviously, you got your conventionals, which are least expensive, and of course, your more expensive is going to be your synthetics, right? You can also buy them in single quart, and of course, you can buy them in big jugs, right? Which usually come in 5-quart flavors. Of course, the average vehicle will come with a 5-quart system, and then if you're dealing with something like my Toyota or other vehicles, you might have as high as 6, 7, 8, or 9 quarts of oil that need to go in there. That needs to be something that you account for when it comes to the oil itself. So you got to make the best judgment and do what's best for you when it comes time to change your oil. Now, when it comes to choosing and selecting filters, obviously you don't want to choose one because it's more expensive or choose one because it's cheaper. You want to look at the components itself, all right? Now, it used to be that there were 3 primarily manufacturers out there, so you bought one and chances are you're buying from one of 3 manufacturers. That's changed a little bit. However, CarQuest makes theirs by from a reputable manufacturer, okay? And theirs are a little bit different than some of the competitors that are out there. First thing I want to note is construction itself. Construction is vastly superior on here. You can feel it with the weight, all right? Not only in the outer canister, but the inner canister. You can feel there's just a different weight in here. There's also an internal bypass valve here, which is really nice for certain engines that require that on startup or initial fill, okay? And then how these things work is they feed through the center channel right here, right? It's force filtered out through an element and then sent back through the rest of the system itself. Now, the element here is a synthetic blend between, well, synthetic and conventional elements, right? Conventional paper or what have you, okay? And there's also other things that people look at as far as efficiency with microns, so on and so forth. I don't think we're going to get into that today, but what I want you to take away is that just because it's less expensive doesn't mean it's the one you want to use unless you're just trying to do an inexpensive oil change with conventional oil. All righty, so let's see what's next in the process. All right, so yes, we got the truck on the rack here, and we're going to put it on the rack for our oil change. Does that mean that you watch this video and say, oh man, they have a rack, I don't have a rack, this doesn't apply to me? Well, no, because we're going to show you also how to properly lift and support your vehicle on your driveway so that you can get under your vehicle and do your oil change yourself, right? But for our convenience sake and for filming, putting it on the rack just made for better footage. All right, since you have your vehicle set for the oil change, it's a good opportunity to check out some basic things underneath your hood. That includes your filter, your air filter. That includes your brake fluid to make sure that you're topped off. And if you have a unsealed, or in other words, you could check the fluid levels on your transmission, you could check that as well. Ours happens to be sealed, so we can't check that, but hey, still going to check out what we can anyways. So when it comes time to changing your own oil, there's only a few tools that you will need depending on your application. Now, if you're using a standard cartridge filter like we're dealing with here, then all you need is a standard wrench to pull those things off. Now, the wrenches come like this, where they're like a set of pliers. This is an oil filter pliers, okay? And of course, it fits different sizes, just like standard slip joint pliers are from your home toolbox, right? Or you'll also see the kind that has like a ring on it, and it's pressurized. You just kind of put it around the filter itself and pull. Both of those are fine for removing the filter. For putting them on there, not so much, right? Now, if you have a cartridge style filter, you're going to be dealing with one of several different ways to get that filter cap off, okay, or that cap housing off. One way is the typical Toyota or GM cap with the nut on it, all right? This is just for the GMs, but there might be different sizes. But basically, you'll see the little filter cap, you pull that off, and boom, there you go, all right? The other way is with a specialty tool, maybe that GM has, or this one for a Toyota for certain applications, all right? And as you can see here, has a little nut on the top, right? And you just simply put the filter in place, and then you pull off the filter itself, right? Now, you want to be really careful when dealing with a cartridge style filter, because that cap of the housing is pressurized. So if you crack it, that means you have to replace it, and when the system pressurizes, you're going to get oil going everywhere, right? So you want to be cautious in that regard. Now, to take the oil drain plug off, all you need is a standard wrench, and of course, to help keep things clean, we use here at Little John's and at Grady's Automotive brake parts cleaner, okay, because that's really good for removing oil, making sure that the system is clean when you get done with it, because you are going to be dealing with the oil and it's going to be squirting everywhere, and you want to clean that bolt, so on and so forth, and a good set of shop rags. All right, so because we're going to drain the system, okay, I always recommend going ahead and pulling the cap, okay, and the reason you want to do this is so that as the system is draining, you don't have that, I'll call it the Coke bottle effect, where, you know, you pour your Coke bottle a little too far and it starts going bloop, 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 right? It kind of makes for an easier splash out, what have you. Now, on my particular model, my filter is at the top of the vehicle itself, right, as opposed to underneath, okay? And this is unique because, well, it provides a couple different situations. Situation number one is that on this vehicle, okay, it goes straight down to the front of the engine itself, down to the lower brush guard or guard itself, or your suspension guard. However, I did a custom thing to this where I actually put a hose from the draining port down underneath the guard itself. So when I pull it, it should drain straight to the floor itself, okay? So we're going to hit that pulled for you, and it's just a matter of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Now, when I put this on, I did it hand tight. However, when I'm going to take it off, it's had lots of heating and cooling and heating and cooling, and it probably will not be hand tight to take off. So I have to use a special tool. So I have already loosened the oil filter with my wrench, all right, and it was just a matter of taking the wrench, going around the top of the housing itself, and remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? So I twisted that to the left, loosened it up where it is now hand tight to come out, so I can just take my hand and spin a couple times, and there we go. And I'm going to hold off on pulling it out all the way because I want to let it drain. You can see that oil draining right there. It'll take a few seconds while it's draining out. And again, because I have that hose ran between the bottom of this housing and the bottom of the car, I'm careful not to make a mess, all right, because it'll drain straight into this oil pan underneath here. You can see it dripping right there, all righty. And again, you don't want to make a mess in your driveway. Now, with the filter off, it's time to put the new one back on. Now, if your filter is underneath the vehicle on the bottom side of the engine, there's an additional step that you want to take, and I'm going to show you what that is here in just a second. But because my filter is at the top of the vehicle, okay, on the top of the engine, I'm going to go ahead and just put some oil on the ring here to ensure a good seal. And of course, I want to clean up where that seal is made. Now, if I was underneath of the vehicle and I had to spin this on, what I would do is I would go a step further and fill this oil filter with oil. The reason you want to do that is when you start the system up for the first time, because you're doing the oil change, you're deplenishing the vehicle of the oil itself. So this gives you an extra cushion. Is it required? No, but it gives you an extra cushion because it takes a few seconds for this to fill up. So if it takes a few seconds for this to fill up, you're depriving the rest of the engine with oil. So it's always a good idea, if your system has the screw on from the bottom, right, go ahead and fill this guy up, okay, in advance, and then put her on there. All right, now it's time to go ahead and put that filter back on there, right? And it's just a matter of lining up and twisting. All right, you don't want to go too tight, just hand tight, all right? Now also that means you don't want to take it on there and try to be the arm wrestling world champion and get it super tight. You just want a good, snug fit. All right, now I'm going to take an extra step here and go ahead and clean this area out with a little bit of brake cleaner, just to ensure that everything is clean through there and through the hose where the oil drains down to the bottom of the vehicle. Now, this is going to be very similar to a majority of rear-wheel drive vehicles. Okay, this is a longitudinally mounted engine. In other words, the front of the engine faces the front of the vehicle, the back of the engine faces the back of the vehicle. This is different than transverse. Okay, a transverse is your typical four-wheel drive where the engine runs left to right and then the transmission is right behind it, also running left to right, okay? Now on this engine here, on this side here, you can see that if I didn't have my little special oil spout, okay, I would have to go ahead and remove this pan, which is a matter of just 4 bolts, okay? And then I could go ahead and remove that filter on top, okay? Nothing to worry about here. Now, this is convenient because this protection plate right here, all right, although held up by 2 bolts, right, I still have access to my oil drain plug, okay? Now, if you had a big system like this and your filter was on the underside of your vehicle next to your oil pan, then this would need to come off in order for you to access that. Now, I can't give you an all-use guide to pulling these off, but just simply look for your main bolts holding on your protection plates, and then just simply pull the plate down. Sometimes it'll come off like a door where it's hinged, and you just pull it off, right? Other times you just simply slides down, right? Other Europeans will also use little plastic and or metal guards up underneath there so that you can access the oil pan as well. So under my truck, we had a typical application for a longitudinally mounted engine and transmission. In this case, we could see that we're dealing with a transverse. As you can see here, the front of the engine is on one side, the rear of the engine's on the other side, right? And there's a couple of quick things to note under here. One, the oil change or the oil drain location might be a little bit different when you get underneath the vehicle. And then two, as I told you earlier, right, you will see on the cap the weight of the oil. And this one mentions that Dexos cleaning system we mentioned by the oil rack on the inside of the store there, right? So in this big application, you would use 020 oil and make sure it is Dexos rated. Alrighty, again, you got a transverse mounted application here. Now there are times where you'll be dealing with a motor that is longitudinally mounted, but it will still be front wheel drive. That'll be for applications like on certain Saabs, certain Subarus, so on and so forth. So here we have our oil drain plug, all right? And we're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put, take this off. It's gonna be a matter of right, tight, left, loose. I'm going to twist this left, right. I'm going to use a pair of wrenches, not pliers, but proper set of wrenches on this, right? And I'm not going to use a drill. I'm not going to use an impact gun. I'm going to do this by hand. Additionally, when I put this back on here, I'm going to do it by hand. I'm going to try to get what I can to see in there with the camera, but because of the amount of oil and splash, I may not be able to film all that for you, or you may not be able to have clear line of sight as I'm doing this, but we're going to give it a shot anyways. All right, now because I have the oil plug a little bit recessed behind this steering cross member here, and the suspension cross member, the chassis cross member, I am going to have to use the standard socket, right? So again, make sure we are set for right, tight, left, loose, right? All right, so let's go ahead and get that up on there, right? And because of the heating process, it has tightened up just a little bit, the heating and cooling. But we should go ahead and be able to pull off the bolt. Should be a little warm, so I'm going to try to avoid the oil on the hands here. All right, we're tight enough where we can get it up. There it goes. All right, we'll let that drain, then we'll pull the plug and take a look at the plug, because that's really important. But here we go. Yep, car's leaking. Now, if you're looking at that oil going, man, that oil is kind of black there. Well, yeah, that is the nature of synthetic oil. Synthetic oil, as it begins to break down, is more prone to showing that black or carbon color there, as opposed to the conventional oils, which tend to be a little bit more brown. But when you put them in, you can't see that breakdown process as time moves forward, right? But just because it's black doesn't mean it's bad, all right? That used to be the old thing from back in the old days with the conventional oil. Not so much anymore, especially with the synthetics. All right, we're going to take a look at our oil plug. And as you can see here, there is no residual oil filings, etc. I don't see any shiny oil on there. If I can get this thing to focus in right, holy moly, it does not want to focus in here today. So I do not see any of that metal in there, so we are good to go. I can put this back in. I'm just going to give it a quick wipe down with the rag, and then we'll get ready to put that back into place. Now, in the event I did see metal filings in there, some of the things I would be concerned with are my bearings and other things that could show wear, because metal filings inside is never a good thing, all right? And that's why they have started to add that magnet on top of the oil plugs so to help mechanics diagnose possible trouble, all right? So if you by chance see oil or see metal filings on there, that is a bad thing. You want to go ahead and complete your oil change, but have your engine checked out immediately by a trained mechanic. All right, so again, when tightening this thing back down, all right, we're going to go ahead and do it hand snug, not super tight. Again, we don't want to try to arm wrestle this thing into place. A gentle snug should be sufficient, all right, and that'll do. And of course, we'll give it a quick squirt with some brake cleaner. I'm going to back the camera away before I do this. All right, quick squirt with some brake cleaner to keep the area clean. And there we go. All right, I made mention before about the oil filters being underneath the vehicle, all right? This is underneath John's vehicle. This one has the V8 swap on it. And you should check that swap out on other videos. And we're checking out a leak that we noticed near the rear main seal, and we're giving that a quick diagnostic. But back on point here, you can see here that this is where you'll typically find your filter, all right, on your typical longitudinally mounted motor, right, with the bottom filter. Summarizing what we've done thus far, we have, one, checked out all the fluids on top, make sure our fluids are topped off. We have checked our air filter. We have went ahead and changed the filter on the top of the engine. We have drained all of the fluids. We have checked to see if there's any filings on there, and all the oil, not the fluids. We've changed the oil. And now we are ready to go ahead and fill this thing back up with the recommended oil, which is 5.5 quarts. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use a funnel for this, all right? And I'm going to go ahead and give this a quick squirt with some brake cleaner to kind of clean up the inside, because you don't want any of that dirt, debris, etc. inside the engine itself. I'm going to give that a good cleaning, and we're going to go ahead and fill this thing back up to recommended spec. We're going to fire it up, and then we're going to check our levels. All right, so I've already have the oil cap removed, so I'm going to put this right into that oil spout itself, and we're ready to receive oil. Now, here's a little tip for you. Have you ever seen this logo right here? See if I can get that to focus in on that. Right here on the quart itself. That means that, hey, this represents your hands, right? And that you're supposed to fill it up so you don't get the slushing and the splashing this way. Not this way, but this way with the big portion facing down, okay? And that helps prevent the whole glugging, slushing effect and what have you. So we're gonna go ahead and fill this up with the recommended 5.5 quarts. And like I said before, we're gonna fire this thing up. 1/2 quart. so all that's left now is to go ahead and fire our engine up, do our final checks as far as make sure we got the right amount of fluid in there, make sure the pressure is reading okay, reset the oil light, and we are good to go. All right, first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fire it up, make sure that we have the right oil pressure there. Let it run for just a quick second. All right, that should be good. I'm also going to take this opportunity to go ahead and reset the oil pressure light on my vehicle. So I'm going to make sure that my odometer is on the actual odometer reading itself, not the trips, but the actual ODO, right? I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to press and hold the odometer trip button. And as I'm turning it back onto the run area, I see the countdown, and now I am back to 0, 0, 0, 0. Additionally, I do like to have my odometer be set at my oil change interval, which I do 5,000 miles for this particular vehicle. Every 5,000 miles, it gets an oil change. And I'm going to document that here in just a second on my document book. All we got to do now is just make sure that my oil level is reading properly on the oil stick, and we should be good to go. All right, so I've already pulled it, wiped it, put it back in there. I'm going to pull it for the final time here, double check here. All righty, and I can see here that, sure enough, on my reading area right here, I am showing right between the main dots. That means I have the right amount of oil in there. So at this point, I am good to go. I got everything rechanged, or I'm sorry, I got the lights changed, the service maintenance lights, and I am confident I could drive on this particular change for another 5,000 miles. And all the fluids are topped off, and I am good. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for watching.